Hello, everyone, and welcome to the April exclusive feature for Season Gaming supporter and producer patrons. Today, I have the distinct pleasure of sitting down with Andrew Reiner, the editor-in-chief of Game Informer. Now, I have followed Game Informer since the 1990s, where Andrew started his career back in 1994. So we talk about his history with gaming, the funny story that got him into gaming journalism, a time that he beat Miyamoto at his own game, and a lot of other things. I hope you enjoy. All right, and we are live with Mr. Andrew Reiner, the editor-in-chief of Game Informer. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on your show.
No, thank you, man. Pleasure is all mine. I know we talked about this a little while ago, and you had some things going on last year that kept you kind of busy. So we'll talk we'll touch on that, of course.
Okay.
But no, really been looking forward to this. I absolutely adore these conversations because one of the things for me, just from a learning perspective, but also insight, I really like to get to giving our audience more of an understanding of things within the industry and how they're actually done, not the speculation and wild ramblings we see a lot of times on social media, but how things actually work. And so someone like yourself, who's been in the gaming industry for so long in the journalism sense and now runs one of the major outlets, there's a ton to learn. I could probably talk to you forever, but we'll keep it a little limited today.
I watched a couple of your interviews, one with Colin, that I thought was really, really well done. I was like, I might learn something about myself doing this interview. So I was on board with this. Yeah,
awesome.
You asked the right questions, and we'll see how this goes. But I've been looking forward to it.
Awesome. That's good to hear. Thank you, man. Like I told you, the goal is this, right? It's just an open conversation. And I am certainly not someone big in the industry, but I have 40 years, same as you, like in gaming. I adore it. I follow every aspect of it for decades now. So definitely a passion. But all right. So with that in mind, as I said, I always do my research on the interviews, and I found an old profile of yours on Game Informer, which said that you have been in love with gaming since you first saw an Asteroids arcade box. Is that accurate?
That is 100% accurate. Yeah. I was at a pizza joint with my mom.
Sure.
It was after, I think my sister had dance class, or she was at a recital or something like that.
Sure.
And we were at this pizza joint, and she held me up so I could see up onto the screen, right? Like kind of looking into it.
Yeah.
And I just saw the little white blobs moving around, and then the triangle shooting at them and then breaking apart. And I was just like, what is this? And she told me. I didn't get to really play it then, but I was just like, that's where it was like kind of that explosion in your mind of like excitement and wanting to know more. And that moment, that spark has not diminished at all. It's just been a through line through my whole career. My whole life has been from that inception moment of seeing Asteroids for the first time.
That's awesome, man. When I read that, I was thinking about God, obviously it's been so long now, but I was trying to think, and I think my first arcade memory of seeing a game was Missile Command, which same era, Missile Command, Centipede, Asteroids, etc. And there was just something magical about those games. And I find it especially funny that you say a pizza joint, because I've had a lot of guests on and one of the things a lot of us reminisce about the early arcade era is how you would like go to your local pizza joint or sub shop or whatever it may be, because they had one or two or three arcade machines and that's just what you played.
Yeah, this one had one. Yeah, that was it.
That's amazing, man. So you said it's been a through line through your entire life. So you started with if I read correctly again, Atari 2600, which many of us did from the era because that was the revolution at the time, right?
Yeah. Here's a horrible story about that, by the way.
Go for it.
Like I said, I was going to learn about myself here. And the first time I played Atari 2600 was at my parents' friends' house. The last name was the Kangases. They had an Atari. Their son had an Atari 2600 in the basement, and so we'd go over there, and it was like everybody kind of hanging out. But I would just retreat into the basement, and I would just be down there playing Centipede and all these games until they had to yank me away from that. But this is supposed to be like family time. These families getting together, and I'm just just off in my own little corner playing games. So I ended up getting that Atari 2600 from them.
Really?
Years later, they gave me that and an Empire Strikes Back poster of Star Destroyers like coming in, and it was like one of the greatest days of my life. Still to this day.
That's amazing, man. That you were able to kind of get that back from that time.
But
speaking of, go ahead.
apologies to the Kangases. I should have been upstairs reminiscing, talking about, being in kindergarten or whatever year I was in.
In the exceptionally rare chance that the Kangases or someone, sees this, they can leave us a comment. That'd be pretty funny.
Make amends here.
We'll go through the video game steps as we go through this. So you said it's been a through line, and I think a lot of people I talk to have always had the passion for gaming throughout their whole life. It never really goes away, right? But was there ever a time where you found yourself not gaming? A lot of us who I've spoken to, I've learned, get into their late teens, early 20s, and you find cars or girls or college or what have you, and you kind of move away from it. Or has it always been just a constant? You always kind of had systems and games with you? It's
always been a constant. Really? Like when I was in college, obviously I played less just because I was hyper focused on that. But yeah, I would say most of the time I've been playing, there's always been something. Even when I'm standing in line at Starbucks, I'm playing Clash Royale or Pokemon Go on my phone. If anything, I'm playing more now. Even as a father, the games, you can't escape them. They're everywhere, which is wonderful.
Yeah. Very different today. And we'll talk about that kind of evolution. We talked about, were you big into, it sounds like it, but were you big into the arcade era? And what I mean by that is that when it really kind of exploded, the Street Fighter 2s came in, the Mortal Kombats came in, and you had that competitive scene, the quarter up on the, on the screen. You into that as well?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I grew up in kind of a farm town in Minnesota. So we didn't have a lot of places we could go. There was 2 arcades. One had like 5 machines. And then the newer one that opened was about a 5-mile bike ride for us.
Okay.
But we'd make it because they had everything. And they had, that was the first place where we got to play Dragon's Lair.
Oh yeah.
And that was all the talk on the playground, right? Like, because it was 50 cents and that was outrageous. It was like, this cannot stand. But that was kind of like the beginning of the end of the arcade scene for us. And then we really transitioned into console with NES and stuff like that. But yeah, you mentioned the quarter on the screen. It's funny because we would, you put that quarter down, there's like 5 quarters lined up. They're quarters. They're all the same change. Like, you just got to kind of mentally keep note of like, mine's the 3rd one.
Yeah. And yet we did, right? Like you knew when it was your turn. Yeah. I forget it might've been Colin or someone I joked about Dragon's Lair with being 50 cents. And I was like, the funniest part about that is the game was so incredible from a visual perspective because it was like you're playing a Saturday morning cartoon at the time.
Yeah.
It's 50 cents. So you wanted to play it, you put the money in, your life could last 20 seconds.
Oh,
that 50 cents just disappeared.
Yeah, that's the thing. Arcades are made to steal your money, right? Like they want to be the claw machine that can't grab, right? Like they don't want you to get to that next level. They want you to like put in more money.
No doubt.
That's, the most successful, the arcades would say the most successful machines were the ones that people couldn't get through, right? Like or, later it was the fighting games where it was just every one was a finite amount of time. Like you knew exactly how long the matches were going to last. There's a timer on it. If it got to that, that's the very end, but usually someone gets knocked out and you move on.
Yeah. Quite funny. What was I going to ask you next is, if I have this right, you kind of started with Game Informer in 95.
Yeah. Well, that was my first publication date, but it was 94.
Okay.
When I was in the offices. And I started out not getting paid, just kind of being a fly on the wall because they wanted me there. The editor-in-chief at the time, Elizabeth Olsen, I was visiting my friend Paul Anderson. I have a huge story to tell here if you want to hear
it. Go for it. Love it.
So I'm in college. This is going to be a long story.
It's fine.
You could pepper in questions if you want. I'm in college going for advertising, art, and design, and I wanted to be a comic book artist. That was my passion. Like, if I turn my camera around here, there's just comics everywhere. Like, you see toys behind me, but it's just comics.
That's great.
It's my library. I'm in my library office. But that's what I wanted to do. That was my passion, was to draw comics because I would draw all the time. I was pretty good at it.
Sure.
But it turns out I was like the third best student in my class by my own, gauge. And I was like, that's not going to get me anywhere.
Okay.
Like there's someone else that's a better comic drawer. And I was thinking, this is just one school in one state. And I was like, I'm not going to make it, but I'm a pretty good storyteller. I'm a pretty good writer. And I was kind of down in the dumps, and I went to, it was in Eden Prairie, Minnesota. I went to Funcoland there for the first time ever. And I was actually applying for a job at Sherwin-Williams Paint that was like 2 stores down. Okay. And I was like, yeah, this looks like it could be an okay job. But I went to the Funcoland and I had no idea, like what it was. And it was just wall-to-wall games. And my jaw hit the ground. The guy who's working behind the counter, this is such a strange moment in my life, was a man named Paul Anderson. And he greets me and he's like, I got to show you something, like right out of the gates, like just not like, hey, welcome to Funcoland or anything. It's like, he's like, look at this magazine. And he's holding up Game Informer with Bubsy on the cover. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, cool. He's like, I'm in here. My review just got printed. I just got this in. Like I'm in this. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. And we sat and talked for like 2 hours. And he's like, games better than anyone I've ever met. Like, you need to come write for Game Informer. So that moment where I was just exploring Funcoland for the first time, he's like, you got to work at Game Informer. He's like, you should get it. I was like, I was just applying for a job over here at Sherwin-Williams Paint. He's like, you should get a job here. And I was like, oh, this would be the best job ever. Yeah. And sure enough, a month later, I'm working there. I took Paul's spot. He went to work at Funcoland's warehouse, which was also in Eden Prairie, because Game Informer was there. So he could go from the warehouse and go write a review and then go back to the warehouse until they brought him on full time. I took his spot in the warehouse, and then I went and followed him over to Game Informer. So it was just this trickle. Like Paul just pulled me along through this company. And sadly, he's no longer with us. He passed away 12, 13 years ago from ALS. And that was super rough. He worked as much as he could right up till the end, but just the nicest guy, and I owe everything to him. And it was just one of those moments in life that I can't believe this all happened. And,
like time and place, right?
Yeah, my life forever changed in that one moment. And it was one of the most puzzling, strangest things that could ever happen to someone, just going into a store and just someone so excited that he's published, and then me learning at that point that I would have a 30-year career after that.
Right. Yeah. I was going to say it's become your entire career, right?
Yeah. That's my whole adult life. Yeah. It's that Game Informer.
That's wild, man. That's wild.
Anyway, long story. Sorry.
No, not at all. No, those are the stories I love to have come out. That's the whole point, is to get something, kind of unique, perspective. That's the whole point. So, so we'll obviously circle back to kind of modern Game Informer and how it's changed and everything. But I brought that up at the time because when I think about gaming, we were talking about late 70s, early 80s, right, into the NES era, and then obviously into the 90s. You're talking about in the mid 90s Game Informer when you first started there. A very, very different gaming industry, right?
Oh yeah, you come in there and it's like, who's your persona gonna be? At the time you had EGM, where they had a ninja reviewing games.
Yes, it did.
Sushi X. You had Game Pro.
Yep.
They were all cartoon characters, and they're like, who are you going to be? And it's like, Andy McNamara, the editor in chief, he's like, you can't be Andy because I'm Andy. And I was like, can I be Andrew? And he's like, no, that'll confuse me. And I was like, Drew? And he's like, no, you should just be Reiner. And I was like, all right. And he's like, you're Reiner 2049er, like mine are 2049er. I was like, no, I'm not. Like, he's like, you got to have like some kind of persona. So it was like RR. So it was like Reiner, the raging gamer. And I was like the angry guy, the angsty guy, and grunge rocker. I had all sorts of different hair colors back then. And, it was so dumb, but we eventually became human beings when real journalism started to infiltrate the field, and that was Next Generation magazine. I don't know if you remember that.
My favorite magazine of all time.
Yeah, mine too.
No offense to Game Informer.
Yeah, Neil West and Trent and all those guys over there, they were fantastic. And we learned a lot from them. Like none of us knew how to write journalism. We were there for our knowledge of games and being able to score them correctly and tell people, recommend, what people should be playing. Like we had no business writing back then. None of us would have had jobs today, given, our skill set back then.
Yeah.
We probably would have applied ourselves in different ways at school and stuff. But it was just the Wild West of writing. And we all learned collectively, the whole industry learned together. And we still are, it's still a growing medium. And I think it's been really good though, these last, maybe now a decade, it's been pretty good, but it was rough for a while, nobody really knew what they were doing. And there's kind of a beauty to that though. I really liked that. I learned about a game I wanted to play from a ninja,
I had on, oh my gosh, I'm going to forget his last name now. I'm embarrassing myself. But a gentleman, one of the friends that I made on Twitter, funny enough, who worked at EGM in the late 90s. And we talked through some of that. And you're right. It was because back then it felt like games were looked at as toys, right? We were in that era where children played video games and it was a smaller niche market and they were looked at as toys. And so video game magazines, it felt like they took on, to your point, that persona of cartoon characters, Saturday morning cartoon, all those things we had grown up with. And it was next generation because I was always a kind of tech geek. I was into tech, as soon as I figured out hardware and I started reading about how the Genesis did things different than the Super Nintendo, I wanted to learn more. And I was always in that tech. And Next Generation was the first magazine I ever read. And my family's English. So I was fortunate, between Next Generation and some of the UK publications. To really start getting into that, I was like, wow, they're really diving into the details of how these things work, and that was the first I'd ever experienced that at the time, because usually it was mostly just about the surface level of the games themselves. And that was kind of a turning point for me.
Yeah, they had Bill Gates on their cover, and we're like, should we put like the cat from Tekken or should it be Law again? And they're doing real, hard hitting journalism.
Yeah, very different. Do you get I mean, I know we all do to a sense, but are there parts of the gaming industry from that era, 80s, 90s, the 816, even up to 32-bit, I guess you could say, or are you get nostalgic about that? Do you miss any aspects of that time?
I do, all the time. Like when I just reviewed MLB The Show 22.
Right.
It's such a weird feeling that there's just one baseball game.
Yeah.
And it feels like back then we used to get more games. There'd be all sorts of baseball games. Look at Rockstar Games. Just take them. We're going ahead in time a little bit.
Yeah.
But they used to pump out Grand Theft Autos. They had Manhunt. They had the Warriors. Bully.
Yeah.
They had all these games on top of each other. Now we get one Rockstar game a decade?
A decade, yeah.
I'm not even joking. Like, I think it is like darn close, 8 to 10 years per game. And that's unfortunate because we were spoiled. So I look back on those days to answer your question as that we were spoiled, that we kind of just kept getting more stuff. Even though games are more evolved now, they're better looking, there's more to do in them. We had a lot more experiences back then. From the big publishers. We have tons of indies now and all that. There's more games than ever, but from the big teams, I feel like we got more from them.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Probably a symptom of game development, right? I mean, we're talking about the expectations of big budget development and how complex things are now, and it has changed the industry in a number of ways. And I think we've talked before with some other people that kind of focus on the tech more around, the company. And I know like Epic, is driving towards this with Unreal 5 in a way, but the company that kind of figures out how to gain efficiency in game development is priceless, right? I mean, that's the absolute key right now. But yeah, it's definitely funny. I always think about that era, and I have a lot of conversations with people that are my age or even older, and just talk through those times. And it's so different nowadays. And I look at people like my son. I don't know how old your kids are, but my son is 16 going on 17, and even he has just no semblance of what it's like not to have instant access to games. Anywhere, anytime, anything he wants to play, he can play it, and there's no understanding of what it was like beforehand.
Yeah, she's 9.
Okay.
She's into Roblox, so she knows
Of
free to
course.
play. For us, though, it was like you go to the store, you go to EB Games, Funkoland, GameStop, Toys
Yep.
R Us,
Toys
and
R
it's
Us.
like
Yeah.
you're looking at like a Genesis game, like Phantasy Star 4, and it's like $79 or
Yep.
$89. I don't remember what it was.
It was. Yeah. It was 80
And
bucks.
yeah, it's like, geez, that's a lot of money. And nowadays people are like, oh, they're talking about raising the price to 69, and it's like, you have it good. You have Game Pass. You have free to play.
Yeah.
We looked at little screenshots that were like an inch big on the back of the box, and then the number of stats, like, oh, this one has 20 weapons. That's cool.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly right.
Made our choices on that. Or a ninja told me to go buy it, So that's how it was back then.
Yes, it really was. um, so before I get into your journey at Game Informer, because I want to spend some time on that, of course, and through journalism, I didn't realize that you co-wrote a book.
I've co-written 3 now.
3. I'm sorry.
One is out there. That's Prime, a Genesis series event.
That's the one I was looking up. Yep.
It's basically Jurassic Park in space, where you have a T-Rex, but this T-Rex has like 5 heads. Instead of eating one person, it eats like 100. It's Chris Gluey. He's a former NFL punter.
Yes.
He's just an amazing person. He and I write these books. So we wrote that. We wrote a sequel that's coming out hopefully this year, maybe next year, and then a 1930s noir novel set in Chicago. I would say that's probably the best thing we've done. That's with our literary agent right now, looking for a publisher. But that I'm really proud of that one. Prime's fun and dumb, but the sequel is really good. But in my opinion, because I wrote it. But I think that book will be something. That third one, the noir book.
That's awesome, man. Well, that's kind of funny transition. We were talking not 15 minutes ago around, getting into the industry and not having any journalism chops, and now editor
now I'm writing books
with writing books. Yeah, that's great. So I figured I'd just call that out because I didn't know that about you, and I thought that was a cool tidbit that many people who listen to this probably didn't know. So
I would say it was probably like 25 years of active schooling, as a profession, learning as we went. I'm still learning how to write stuff. It's a very unconventional way where you learn from others, and you get programs like Grammarly that really can help you understand tenses and all that stuff, and just things you don't even think about. That we're so spoiled again, even in terms of writing. It's much easier now than it was back then.
Yeah, a lot of aspects for sure. So let's jump over to Game Informer. So you said earlier 94, and we're going back some ways. So what you think about? Gosh, you're coming up on 30 years then at Game Informer, which is impressive not only for yourself but for the outlet. I mean, we've seen countless magazines and outlets come and go in that time. So what is kind of the biggest change that you've seen in these 30 years between, how publication ran in the mid 90s versus now? I mean, obviously there's probably things like speed to market and the social media age and all those obvious things, right? But for you, and now being editor in chief, like what's that like going through that evolution? I wouldn't even know where to begin and kind of, thinking through it.
A lot more editing now. Stuff is readable. That's the big one. There was stuff like we used to send our copy out of house to the layout team, the design team, and if your text didn't fit the box, they would chop stuff and make it fit the box, and then you'd get the film back. Nobody's looking at the film, because you did film before you went to print.
Sure.
Before you went to plate, and all of a sudden you get the magazine at work and you start reading your reviews or your bio and you're like, this isn't even English anymore. I don't think. At least it has the score on it, so that was, we eventually brought in like a English teacher but she didn't understand game lingo, so to help copy edit. And then we just learned as we went, collectively. We've never had a dedicated copy editor after that at Game Informer. Wow. We are all kind of in charge of our own copy, and we have some amazing, incredible writers on our staff now that really help.
Yeah.
But it's a group effort. There's 4 or 5 sets of eyes on every page that goes out. And yeah, I would say that's the big change. Is just, there's more accuracy, better reporting. It's not just kind of fire it off like it used to be. Just, it used to just be about content. Now it's quality over having more stuff out there. So that's a big change. And then also just on the game side, we used to get in review code months before a game would come out, and it would say on the disc or even cartridge like 80%. And it's like, that game is 80% complete according to the developer.
Right.
So think about that. We're in the world now of day 1 patches and day 5 patches, where they keep making the games. But this is like, we're reviewing games at 80%.
Right.
So when I played GoldenEye, it didn't have like all these different controller options. Like it was funky when we played it the first time, the way it would move. And then all of a sudden it comes out and it's like, well, they figured out a better solution. So that's very different. The publishers, rightfully so, are not allowing people to review their games before they're done.
No doubt.
That's a big change.
Wow. Yeah, that's something. I know the review process is something that's talked about pretty heavily today. And, I think for an outlet like yourself that has so many eyes on it, the sheer amount of content that comes out now, like prioritization of how you cover the industry, not just the news, of course, but just titles and reviews and everything else. I'm sure that's got to be daunting at times.
It is. Yeah. We never have enough bodies. And we're very lean and mean compared to other outlets like IGN or GameSpot. We have way less people. It's kind of a magic trick that we pull off there, just the amount of content we turn out. But we're smart about it, right? Like we're picking the right battles, picking the right games to cover. It's very pure at Game Informer, and I love that. A lot of stuff we write in print we'll put online, so that's where you kind of get that double dipping of expanding the amount of content we have, making it look like there's more than there really is. Yeah.
That's I was going to mention that to you, and I say this wholeheartedly, truthfully, is that there is only one major gaming outlet that I have pinned on my browser, and it's Game Informer. And I say that, and you kind of touched on it there. I feel that especially from a major outlet, what I would consider the major gaming outlets, Game Informer, you guys just do a really nice job of, and I probably go to your site. I would say every day, for sure, go to your site, and it's just game coverage. It's not controversy. It's not the nonsense. There's just game coverage. And you guys do, especially as you said, with the staff you do a fantastic job of just prioritizing game coverage. So I wanted to make a point of saying that today, but I just, as someone who runs a smaller outlet, right? Like I look at that day in, day out, and I'm like, I honestly don't know how you guys do it, because it's impressive. It really is.
Yeah. Not writing that way is, we're probably hurting ourselves not getting as many views as we should, or expanding our audience. But I think our bread and butter is still the magazine. That's our focus. And the online component is just kind of something we do on top of that. We love it. I think we're very successful at it. Our video is booming. We're doing great business there. But one thing I learned, I was on Facebook one day and I saw a comic book story come up, and this is about the MCU.
Yeah.
It says, you're never going to believe what's going on with this character. And it has a screenshot of, I think it was the Guardians of the Galaxy, and it's like Star-Lord front and center. I'm like, oh, I want to read about this.
Yeah.
So I start reading about it, and then I realize, like, it's not even about the MCU. It's about the comic books, the Marvel comic books. But they're trying to trick you into reading it because they want you to read about the MCU. They know that's what's going to get people to click in. And of course, I just immediately unfollowed that. I was like, but it's just such a big lesson as a writer that you're like, that's too far.
Yes.
You never go that far. And then even just that line of thinking, like you're in the game of deception, and we would never do that. And most, the IGNs, GameSpots, Polygon, all, the sites I love going to, they don't do that. They are very much about, here's what's going on in the world of games. Here's why they matter. And I love that. We have some great outlets out there.
Yeah, we really do. And That's what I was going to ask you about too. Is as you look across the space, and you just mentioned some of them, the outlets who do a much more, I would say, responsible job of reporting
Yeah,
versus
it's a good way to put it.
yeah, versus counter to that, which we know are out there too. Does that bother you at all? Do you sit back and think, like, man, I wish this X, Y, and Z wouldn't approach things this way, or do you just kind of say they're over there, we're doing our thing, and you try not to really focus on it?
I try not to focus on it, but it does bug me. I
Yeah,
think it bugs everyone when you get burned by that, or you see
sure.
like, people are getting burned by it, or they're buying into it. Yeah, that it does bug me. Yeah, but I'm not going to change what I do over it, or I'm not going
Yeah.
to write angry responses or on Twitter. I try to stay pretty positive out there. Yeah.
Yeah. Me as well. I always like kind of asking that question because my answer is very similar to yours. It's like it's never going to change what we do, even as a small outlet. But it does bug me. It's like, God, I wish I didn't have to see. I wish I knew that things like you just mentioned, right, where they are advertising a story and it happens to be MCU, but it's not. I
Yeah, it's
wish,
a bait and switch. Yeah.
yeah, I wish bait and switch wasn't necessary to drive traffic for number of reasons, right?
Yeah.
All
It should
right,
be
so
like a timeout, like you get a journalistic timeout. you're banned for 2 days.
in a perfect world, yeah, no doubt, no doubt. So I'm gonna throw you a curveball here, not on the
Mhm.
spot, but we've
Sure.
talked about history, and I want to just interject this while you're not thinking about it. What do you believe is the greatest game of all time? Can you answer that?
Uh, the Legend of Zelda for me.
Okay.
And well, it's such a loaded question because
Yes.
that's the game I enjoyed the most, or that's the one that really just made my, changed my world and view of games, of what they
Yeah.
could be and what potential they had. But I kind of look at it like the Beatles albums, where it's like on any given day, I would say any different Beatles album's the best album ever. And I kind of do that with Zelda as well, where it's like, oh, now it's Link to the Past, or I
Okay.
really like Ocarina of Time, or
Sure.
Wind Waker. Even I was blown away by that. Like I got
Yeah.
so into that game. That series as a whole is, I think, just the greatest. Just how it brought kind of environmental storytelling to games, the
Mhm.
feeling of truly exploring and having ownership over that experience. Like you feel like you're paving your own path. There's no waypoint system. It's just all clever design.
Yeah.
That just opened everything up for games, in my opinion. Yeah.
That's awesome. All right. Yeah, I just throw that question out there. Sometimes you get a response that's clean cut as yours, and others, people are like, "Oh God, it depends what criteria you're assigning, to best and everything." But yeah, I would say Zelda's probably a pretty popular choice.
What's yours? Has anybody thrown the question back at you?
Oh boy, yeah. We have this discussion here and there. I don't know. It can change from one day to the next.
Okay.
My favorite series is unabashedly Halo. Halo did a tremendous amount for me and my love of competitive shooters. I used to be a tournament player, and
Oh wow. Okay.
it's just been a huge part of the last 20. Well, Halo's on 20-year anniversary. It's been a huge part of my last 20 years. So I have a certain fondness for it. But objectively, when we come up with this question, I honestly think, like, if I were saying this is what I think is the best game for me, would be Witcher 3, actually.
Wow.
Uh,
Okay.
yeah, I think that game is phenomenal inside and out. And yeah, not much more to say there. I've played it 3 times, hundreds of hours, and it's
It's an
incredible.
amazing game. Yeah. I,
Yeah.
I remember going down a side quest, and one of the biggest things in that game, and it was like, I think I'm like 8 hours into this side quest, and I love it. It's like
And it's
better. It's
meaningful,
better.
right?
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
better than the main quest. And that's just that moment of just
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
they nailed it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So sorry to interject there. Just I like kind
Oh,
of
it's
throwing
okay.
that out
Yeah.
there. But back to Game Informer. So what would you say, like, as you look across the space, and you've got the speed to market angle with social media. What's kind of the most important thing for you guys day in, day out, that you're hoping that your team achieves, right? Like when you look at a day and you say, okay, some big news came out, whatever it may be, or a big topic that is needing coverage. like as you look at that day and map that out, like what are you guys hoping to achieve from a market presence standpoint? Does that make sense? Like,
yeah, I'll give you kind of three answers, because I
sure.
think we have 3 points to our business. For print, it's just telling stories that are meaningful and make you want to read the magazine. And that's such a simple answer, but that's 100% the truth. We have amazing journalists and writers at Game Informer, and I just want them to express what they think about games, what they think's cool. We have pitch meetings. I'm never pitching them stories, rarely. Every once in a while I'll be like, let's do some top 10 lists. Those are fun. Let's rank the best, the Mario games. And everybody's like, oh yeah. And it's that's about the extent I have. But they'll be like, hey, I want to tell the making of Bully 2, the hidden making of Bully 2. And it's like, go for it. Let's see what happens. What do you need? What support? Or that's the kind of pitching that we have at Game Informer. And every writer kind of has ownership over their experience there and their workload, which is, I think it's fantastic. And that's where you get the best work.
Sure.
Online, the answer is just, I want you to go to GameInformer.com and feel like at the end of the day and feel like you got a snapshot of all the meaningful news that day.
Yeah.
And just whether you're reading the headlines or diving into the stories, you get everything you need to know that is important. And then in the video space, it's we want to show you the games that matter, that you should be playing, and take a good look at them, and we'll tell you why. So that's Game Informer's business in a nutshell.
That's very cool. As you were kind of going through that, I was thinking to myself, the difference in print, of course, is you're obviously a very different speed to which you're getting that in front of people's eyes.
Yeah, it's a long lead. Yeah.
Yeah. So does that, I have to imagine, right, that impacts kind of how you approach certain stories. I would think stories about previews are obviously a big part of Game Informer, right? And
it is. Yeah.
But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's just, here are the games you should have on your radar is kind of what Game Informer does. We've kind of cut down on reviews just because the time you go to print, the game might have been updated twice and might be completely different.
Right.
But reviews are very much a moment in time now. You almost need to have like a dedicated reviewer per game. Like, you're our Fortnite reviewer, and just keep reviewing the game and updating, because when we reviewed it on day one, it's a completely different game now.
Yeah.
But it's long leads different. So you don't ever want to do like news, like in print. You just want it to be stuff that will be meaningful by the time it goes to print. And also, if it's sitting in a doctor's office for months or on your coffee table for months, you should be able to pick that up, open it up, and be like, oh, I'm gonna read this profile on Shigeru Miyamoto. That's timeless. Like that can be evergreen the time you go to print or by the time you read it.
Yeah, great point. One of the things on print I want to ask you about too, because you can't see, but I'm sitting in the middle of my game room and I actually have several magazines framed, quite a few actually, that are up on my walls because I love either the cover art.
Okay.
And I've collected things from Next Generation to Edge magazine. I really enjoy out of the UK, Game Informer covers, and you guys have traditionally had some really, really cool covers, and the artwork that goes into them. And I know even recently you started doing these gold foil editions, which, there's little I wouldn't do to have the gold foil edition of the Halo Infinite cover. But, how do you guys kind of organize that as you get your lead story for the month, right? And obviously you work with the publishers to do that. Yeah. But how do you kind of, do you have like certain artists you go to, or is there someone responsible for kind of creating that look and image and feel?
Yeah, a lot of times you're working with the dev team on it, right?
Okay.
Like you have, or you hire an artist to do it. Either way, you're like, here's the space we have. It's going to be gatefold. We're not going to put a lot of text on it. It's all about the art.
Yes.
But then you just start working with that artist. So like when I did the Spider-Man, Insomniac Spider-Man cover, we got Alex Ross to do our cover.
It's awesome.
And he's like one of the greatest artists ever.
Yes. Yeah.
So, it's like, hey, Alex is going to send you a sketch of the cover, see if you like it. And I'm like, yeah, I'll see if I like this Alex Ross sketch. And he sent me a photograph. Like he photographed his drawing table with
Uh-huh.
the image on it and sent it over via email. And I was just like, "Gah!" It's like, yeah, it's good to go.
Yeah.
So it's, you have that, or, like Zelda. There was, I can't believe, working with like one of the Zelda artists, they sent over these sketches, 3 different sketches for Twilight Princess.
Okay.
And I had to, and they're very rough, like just like almost like you draw it on a napkin, like very rough,
Okay.
but it's like
Yeah.
I had to pick from 3 different ones. And it's like, I want them all.
Right.
Like it's a crime to say these 2 are not as good. Like people should see these pieces of art.
Yeah.
But yeah, then you pick that one, and then they flesh it out, and you again have back and forth on color and placement, and
Sure.
but yeah, most of the time, you don't bat an eye at it. It's like, this is brilliant. It's an Alex Ross piece. Like
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah, Alex
yeah,
Ross. I mean, he's, if not one of the the most famous comic book artists. I mean, his works go for, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
That's
he's
incredible.
amazing. Yeah, we
Yeah,
don't have the original. He kept that.
of
Like,
course.
but I do have it framed. That's one of them I have framed. Which ones do you have framed, by the way?
Oh gosh, I have. So this is a funny story, but Edge magazine,
Yeah, I love
um,
Edge.
yeah, they did when they did their 200th episode, they did 200 covers, which I would love to figure out or talk to how the hell they pulled that off. But they did 200 unique covers of classic video game art from, from the beginning. And so I have, it's actually, you know what? Nah, it's too dark back there. I was going to say it's literally on that wall back there, but I was a Fantasy Star nut as a kid. I have a Fantasy Star print, and under there I have 4 of the Edge magazine 200 covers. So I have Street Fighter 2, Axley from Super Nintendo. You remember that game?
Yeah. Oh yeah. The
Yeah.
banjo on the cover, right? The Super Nintendo cover art, wasn't that? Was that Axley?
The lava guy.
Okay, Lava Guy. Oh,
Yeah, yeah.
wow. There is a horrible Super Nintendo art. I got to look this up.
And I have Gradius and Gauntlet back there. But then I have some Master Chief covers here. Like I said, big Halo guy. Game Informer. Recently, I have 2 set aside over there. I have Elden Rings and I have Horizon Forbidden West sitting to the side over there because I love that artwork. And then I'll have to send you a picture offline, but I have a stack. I mean, I'm talking multiple feet tall of Game Informers stacked up in the back of my room over here.
That's the one.
Oh,
Phalanx.
Phalanx. Yes, yes. Some of those old game cover arts, man. You got an old guy sitting with a banjo and it's a space shooter. Like, how'd you come up with that?
And now you look at it, you're like, that's brilliant. Back in the day, it's like, yeah, you probably killed your game. But, decades later, it's like, you really took a chance and did something different. We love it.
Yeah, no doubt. And I've got some others. I've got a Red Dead 2 one here. I'm trying to look around because I forget. I've got so many. I mean, it's endless, the stuff I collect. But yeah, I just always found that fascinating. I really enjoy. There's something like, obviously, like I said, still subscribe to Game Informer, and every time you resubscribe now, they ask you if you want the digital, and I'm like, no, I want the physical.
Don't print. Yeah, don't do digital. I mean, the digital magazine's amazing on phone, but like, yeah, support print. We want you to support
Of course,
print magazine.
Of course. Yeah, I'm still like a kid. I don't know about you. Every time that shows up, I'm like, oh, great, new gaming magazine. Like, I still get that feeling of getting a new gaming magazine and looking.
I do too. Yeah, I do too. And I've made over 300 magazines now.
Crazy.
Monthly deadlines. It feels like Bill Murray Groundhog's Day a little bit. Like here we go again. Same problem.
Yeah,
we're trying to figure out a solution. It's like we've already done the solution 86 times, but we're still banging our heads on the table. Yeah, but I love it. I love the whole process.
That's awesome. So you became editor-in-chief last year, March of last year, I believe.
Okay. Sure.
It's been a blur, right?
Yeah.
So what was taking on that role, right? Excuse me. I obviously don't have insight into what your role was like prior to that and the specific dynamics of each role, but I would have to imagine that moving into the role of editor-in-chief of a publication that you'd been with for so long was both a little surreal, but also I would expect, was there a shoulder of kind of responsibility that kind of fell on you? Did you feel at that point?
Yes and no. So just a little history. Andy McNamara and I were kind of known as like the Andys, right? Like we were like we traveled in packs at E3. I've been to every E3, right? Like we would go to demos together. Any cover conversation pitch that we're in, it's Andy and I.
Okay.
So when Andy left, I was executive editor. When he left, I just kind of slid into that role. I was already doing it, right?
I
Like,
gotcha.
so there wasn't a lot of new responsibilities, new meetings about budget and stuff like that, I had to take on. And then just kind of more shouldering the solo weight of the whole team now, without Andy there, that was, a hard day for me. It was, that's a hard pill to swallow, is someone you've worked with almost 30 years is, he's been your buddy through this whole thing. He's moved on in his career, in his life. And, he seems super happy at Electronic Arts, and it's a natural step for him to make. But not much changed other than that, other than just kind of that feeling of loss of losing him. Yeah.
Gotcha. Is that, are you still, you kind of said it already, but I'll ask it anyway. And, 30 years or coming up on 30 years in journalism and gaming, is this kind of still your passion, the journalism side of it? I mean, do you still just kind of wake up every day and kind of get excited about the work you guys are doing, and you kind of foresee yourself continuing to do this for time to come?
Yeah, I do. That's a perfect way to put it. I wake up excited, and you never know what's going to happen on any given day. And
that's true.
The game industry, and you wake up like, I'm going to write an article about this, and then all of a sudden you're, in 2 live streams, you're writing news stories. You just never know, and that's part of the fun and part of the frustration too, right?
Sure.
But, definitely, if you're not built for this, there's a lot of frustration can come from it, or you're not weathered. It can be overwhelming at times, but yeah, I do love it. And I keep myself occupied by, one, playing games, reading comics, but also, like you brought up, writing books. I play in bands. I have a lot of distractions. Met the love of my life a few years ago, and
awesome.
So it's just, life happens, and I've never been happier than I am right now. So
that's great.
Knock on wood. I don't want anything to change.
No, that's fantastic to hear. Funny enough, my stepdaughter turned 30, and she was one of those who was like, "Oh God, I'm 30," and I was like, "No," I was like, "30s are great." Like, I don't, you just said it, but like, I'm in my 40s now, and I've never been happier. This is the best time of my life. You know what I mean? I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Good. I love to hear that too.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
Good for you. Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you this, because I running the outlet I do, and we're non-monetized. Like I said, it's a hobby publication, really. But I do have like 12 contributors now that write things and do work and just share that passion, and they kind of love it. And when I get new people that kind of ask me about it, there's a lot of different advice I give depending on where they are, writing style, all these different things that go into it. And I would ask you, knowing this huge knowledge base of the industry and journalism and running a publication, what advice would you have to anyone listening to this, to our younger audience, that would say, they want to get into the space, they want to get better at writing, they want to eventually, join like a Game Informer and kind of grow a career in that sense? What advice would you give them? Where would you have them prioritize their efforts, if that makes sense?
I think the first thing is, that first time that you write an article, or you're trying to write a game review or make a game video, I guess in this day and age, and, to put on YouTube or a live stream, what have you, are you enjoying it? Did you enjoy that process?
Yeah.
If it excited you, and you couldn't wait to do more, keep going with it. But if at any point you're just like, I don't think this is for me, really reflect on that. Think about it. Are there things maybe you could change that maybe would make it for you? But if you're struggling out of the gates right there, or it doesn't feel like it's a fit, change. That kind of harks back to me in college with wanting to be a comic artist. It was a struggle for me. I just, it's not that I wasn't good enough. I'm sure I could have applied myself more and done it, but I was more into writing. I was better at writing and just visualizing that way. That was where it hit for me. The the other advice I would say is, if you really are into it and you think you got the chops for it, and you could fit at Game Informer or IGN or anywhere, get to know the people in the industry. We're out there on social media.
Yeah.
Interact with us. Don't be afraid of that. Just write to us. A lot of us write back, have meaningful conversations there, get your name out there. There's a lot of people that, just started out as fans that we brought on, just through social media interactions. And that's how it all starts. And getting to know people, and why not? It doesn't take much time. Just be thoughtful. Be careful in the social space. You don't want to burn bridges right there. Yeah.
It's funny hearing you say reach out, on social media, and you kind of have this open access to people like yourself or people across the industry now. In direct contrast to the story you told of how you got into Funko Land and Game Informer to begin with, right? Because if you think about back then, I mean, those were nothing like that was impossible. It's just it's wild to think about that access today.
The other thing I'll add on that is gauge your skill set. And if you think you are skilled enough, like I think my writing is as good as Reiner's or someone else's, that doesn't mean, you don't have to go to college to get a job in the industry. Like if you have the skill set and you've done it out there and proven it in blogs or whatever, or you have good writing samples, we look at all that stuff, right? Like before we look at degrees and all that stuff, we look to see if they have that spark,
Gotcha.
The it factor for writing, if they can break down a game, if they have interesting entry points, because people can get degrees in writing and learn the chops, but are they skilled at it? Do they have a unique perspective? Something that pulls us into their writing, we look at that first.
Yeah, that's a good point. Very fair. Do you so this is kind of a funny one I wanted to ask you is, do you have any kind of crazy story you could share? You got 30 plus years in the industry. You've been to every E3.
Yeah.
You've run an outlet. Give me a crazy story.
How much time do you got?
Give me your top one or two or funny stories, whichever one you want to tell of a time when something kind of hilarious or crazy happened that you had to deal with.
Yeah, I'll tell one with Shigeru Miyamoto.
Okay.
So it's Star Fox 64 is coming out, or it's about to, something like that, and they're going to have a tournament at E3 for journalists.
Okay.
Just to go and play Star Fox against each other. And it's like, all right, this will be fun. This will be cool, right? Like, I'm all about it. So I train in the office, and I learn, like, in the multiplayer, it's 4-player split screen.
Of course.
That if you fly low, you disappear from the radar. And I was like, okay. And so I'm mopping up people in my office. We're playing, and we're really good at it, and we're having a blast. And then I go to E3, and they have it up on the movie screen, and then they have these R-wings that you get in, and then they turn and point up at the screen. So there's 4 of them. Okay. And I'm in this competition, and no one knows about flying under the radar, right? Like, everybody's just kind of up in the clouds. And I am like, like the Red Baron of Star Fox. Like, I am mowing people down, and I win the tournament.
Nice.
And they're like, hey, as a hold on, I got to show you this.
This is why you have these conversations. I love stories like this.
Yeah, we're going to have props.
It's great.
They're like, hey, Miyamoto and some of the creators are going to come out, and they come out and they give me this one-of-a-kind gold controller, and they sign it.
Who's that signed by?
Miyamoto, and I can't remember the other creator.
Oh, man.
One of the main directors on Star Fox 64.
Okay.
I'm drawing a blank. I mean no disrespect, but so they give me that. I'm like, oh my gosh. And then they're like, that's not all. We're now going to play against them in the game. and so we get in the R-Wings, and this Nintendo spokesperson comes over, and they're like, hey, take it easy. Like, these guys, they made the game, but they haven't been playing it, and like recently, and like,
sure,
like, just you're really good at it. And so as my R-Wing's loading up, I'm like, I'm playing against Shigeru Miyamoto in Star Fox 64, and they want me to like take my foot off the gas. And I was like, no. So I went bonkers. Just mowing them down, just like, and it was funny because we, the R-Wings come back down, turn down, and we get out, and Miyamoto just kind of looks back and kind of gives me a nod, and I give him a nod, and I was like, that's it. My career's never gonna have a moment that tops that. Like that's the peak, like right there.
That is epic.
Yeah, just one of the strangest things. Who would have thought like I would ever play against Miyamoto in a game? Like you see Spielberg playing Wii Sports with him. I'm like, that's nothing.
Yeah, you played him in his own game on stage and dominated him.
Yeah. It's you have to, right? Like it's like you can't, you cannot.
Yeah. I didn't get here by taking my foot off the pedal. Like that's amazing, man.
Yeah, that's my probably the craziest thing that's ever happened to me, or that's strangest thing that's happened to me. Yeah, but I have so many stories. Pretty much every E3 you get a story, and you're like, whoa, that was wild.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. I was fortunate enough to just go to 2. I only more recently obviously got into this. So I went to 2018, 2019, and then had big plans for 2020, sadly, before COVID. Does that, obviously a lot of history and memories there. Do you think we see E3 come back proper in its same form again?
No. I think it's gone. Yeah, I think it's gone. I think, Jeff Keighley, who's a friend of mine, I think he knows what's up. With the not only the Game Awards, but what he's doing with Summer Game Fest.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be the future. And then also just publishers doing their own things.
Yeah.
It's so much cheaper. It's too bad because like it had that World Fair. I've never, obviously you and I never went to a World Fair. We're too young, but the World Fair was like a cool thing. Like you look back on that in history, it's in the Captain America movie, all that stuff. You're like, oh, that was neat. Like Walt Disney showing off a ride for the first time and new technologies. E3 had that where you're like walking by Nintendo's booth and it's like the logos are so big. You're like the letter N. It's like, oh
festival.
It's like, oh my gosh. It was all about spectacle. And it was such a great thing for the industry to have the spotlight on it. But now we're well beyond that point. We're in the billions of dollars being made, and it's gaming has launched, through the stratosphere. And I just think publishers will do their own thing and get the spotlight or be a part of Keighley's stuff. He's the new hot, and I think he does a great job with it. So I think games are in a good spot, but I will miss those gatherings.
Yeah, me too. Like I said, I only got to experience a couple of them, but there was something about it, and I talked to a lot of people, of course, who who have the same way of feeling in digital, and it doesn't really need to come back. And I think the point we always make is no, it doesn't need to come back, right? But there's something that was fun and special about it, and it's a shame to think that we won't get to experience that again in the same vein. So
yeah, and right now we're in the pandemic, right? Like DICE. I had some friends that went to DICE. One of them came back with COVID. You heard about GDC. A bunch of people got COVID there because someone stupidly was like, I got COVID, but I got to do my job. Well, hopefully I don't get people sick. And that's me those are my words, but that's basically what happened, right? Like someone knowingly had COVID, was there, and a lot of people got sick. So it's like, I'm supposed to go to Star Wars Celebration in May, and it's like, I don't know if I want to. And then it's like Summer Games Fest is coming up. It's like, and all, who knows if that's going to be in person, or who knows what else is going to be coming up. But
got PAX this week too, I believe. As we're recording that later this week.
PAX East, like PAX Prime, or Comic-Con.
Yeah.
Is it even smart to go to these anymore? I don't know. QuakeCon is going to be digital again.
Yep.
So it's too bad, but at least for the time being, we're safe, I guess.
Yeah. Well, man, it's been an absolute delight talking with you, Andrew. I hope that well, first let me ask, is there anything else that you wanted to mention before I start to kind of close out?
No, it's been a hell of a career, and I want to keep doing it as long as I can, and hopefully we cross paths.
Absolutely.
Speaking of
Yeah.
E3s and all that, but maybe there will be a time where we're in the same room, and yeah, would love to buy you dinner or something like that. Continue our conversation because it's been a delight. I've had a great time talking to you.
Great. That's great to hear, man. Yeah, I could talk games endlessly. So I was just gonna say, I hope this isn't the last time we get to sit down and chat. I'd love to revisit with you and just
Absolutely. Yeah,
and
part two coming
yeah,
soon.
part two with a wide range of topics. But no, I sincerely wanted to thank you. I genuinely adore these conversations and the insight that gentlemen like yourself have. And like I said at the top, I find this type of content meaningful. I think it's insightful and it provides context and a lot of other things for people that follow the industry or want to get into the industry. So I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime.
So thanks again. So with that, yeah, we will close out. As always, you can find everything we do at seasongaming.com. I encourage you, if you're not already checking out Game Informer, to do so and get that print publication. Support
Right.
print.
Print.
I'm your host, Ainsley Bowden. This is Andrew Reiner, editor-in-chief of Game Informer, and we will see you next time.